Hello there. This is Chris Fernandez. I'm Today I'm just gonna show a little bit how to do the automation using loading configuration. So this is the third video of this series of automation with Restpy. The first two videos was more about creating a new session and then adding ports to a session. This third video here is a little bit of what you do when you actually have a saved configuration file and you add and then you create and then you load that configuration file. But now you have a problem. Well, not a problem, but now you have the task of actually setting the load configuration to your own session, right? So somebody gave you a config file that you want to change. Now you can just load that configuration file and use it in your session. There is only one caveat here. When you're doing that, when you're loading a configuration file, if the file that got created in a version that is ahead of what you're using, that will not work. So for example, if I have version 10.0 or 1080, which was what I have here, and I save a configuration file and I give it to somebody that's running an earlier configuration, that will not work. The only way it works is if you move forward. So if you have, for example, a session saved on 9:30, and then you open up that session on 9:50, 10:0, and so on. All right, so you can only move forwards, not backwards, in terms of saving sessions. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to start this automation here, and I'm kind of going to step through it. So I'm going to skip the first part here, which is the loading the session, and then I'm gonna stop right here so we can go over it. So I'm gonna start this debugging session here. As you can see, it's gonna go in here and grab a session, create a session, and it's stopped right here. So I'm just gonna step through this code here. So first thing I'm gonna do here is to load the file. So the file that I have in for this session here is called it's called load session with ports v1 .ixncfg. So this file here is actually a part of the same directory that this test is running. It doesn't have to be. I do some coding here to just print out the whole path for that for this particular configuration file. And then over here, what I do is I change the file name. So you can see here, I'm gonna load it. So when I load the file name, I'm loading the file name here, as you can see on the right side here of the screen. It comes with two ports that are part of the old session. So those two ports are something that is part of the name of the ports is Gigi something, and it's not what you are going to use. And then to make sure that I don't oversubscribe or I don't save that configuration file, what I'm doing here is actually changing the name. So I change the name of the file and I save it with a different name. So over here now I change it to load session with ports v1 -chris, and then I'm saving that file now. So that way you can keep the original file the way it was and don't have to deal with it. Now, when it comes to the ports, the name of the ports is very important. So in my case here, the ports is Gigi something, which I don't know. So there's two ways for you to handle that. One is for you to find the name of the ports and use the name of the ports. If you are doing the mapping here and you use different names for the ports, what's going to happen is that two extra ports are going to be added to the session, not replaced. So there's a difference between adding ports to the session and replacing the ports, mapping to a different port. So right now, those ports here are mapped to a chassis and a load module that I don't have. It's not part of my configuration, right? So I have here a chassis that is .12. That's not my chassis. And I have ports here that this name here is not what I want as a name. I want port 1 and port 2 as names. In case that I don't know the names, I can easily get the names by doing this here, right? So if I do IX network vport find, I grab the configuration of all the ports, and I'm getting the name. So what I could do is go into this configuration here, grabbing the name of those. And then when I use it down here, I would have to use the names that are part of the original file. So that's one way of doing it. So over here, you can see that I was able to grab the name. So I just for an example here, I just put the names into a list. So in the case that if I just wanted to use the same name as the original files, I'll use those names here as part of when I'm calling the map routine down here. But this is not what I want to do. I want to change this to port 1 and port 2. So what I'm doing here is I'm going into the existing ports and changing the name by just calling that function again. So I'm calling the vport find again. That gives me a list of all virtual ports or vports on that session. And then I'm putting I'm changing the name to port 1 and port 2. So this is what I'm doing here. That's what this code does down here with those two lines here. So when I execute this, you can see now that the save ports now have ports 1 and port 2. So now when I'm actually mapping the new ports to this and I'm using the same name, these ports are going to be replaced by what I want, right? So here I'm just mapping. We used this before. So we did the mapping and now we're doing the connect. So now we're bringing in a new ports that I want to use for my session. So the last thing here that we're going to show here is, again, we're using the stat view for looking at if those ports came up or not as soon as it comes up. So just waiting a few seconds here. Those ports are being connected, ports 1 and 2, and they're both up. So now they're connected. The connect, right, this connect here is going to be come back. It's going to come back to the code, and now I can move on. One thing about this connect, we saw that before on the previous example. The connect here, it has a force ownership parameter that you can pass in here. Just be careful with that one, because if somebody's actually if you are loading somebody else's configuration file and have information about their ports, you can oversubscribe them and kick them out of their session in case of you're using the same ports or you forget to change the ports. So look into the connect here and all the variables that can go with it. So another thing that I'm doing here, so what I'm doing here again is just looking for the port statistics. So I'm looking for in this table here, and I'm looking for the column name link state, and I'm looking for the ports to be up. So in this case here, everything is up. So I come back out. Now, one last thing that I want to show here is that the new ports got changed. So now my ports are looking at the correct place. So I'm looking at the right chassis. But as you can see here, I have two chassis. I have one chassis from the previous version that it keeps retrying to connect because that was part of the saved configuration, right? So what I'm doing in this code here, which is kind of optional, if you don't do anything, it just keeps trying here and it's going to be saving it. So if you save this file and give it to somebody else, now you have like three chassis trying to, then your session is trying to connect to the chassis all the time, and it's just not happening. It's not going to happen. It's just going to be keep trying. So over here, these lines of code here, all I'm doing is just removing the chassis that are not in use. So this code here is IX network sessions, available hardware, find chassis and find. This gives me a list of all the hardware. So if I execute this line here, it's going in and grabbing all the information about the both chassis. And then I'm looking at this chassis here, and you can see down here below what this chassis looks like. So this chassis is probably the first one that that I got. So it's the old chassis, right? So if I look at when this variable here gets defined, down here somewhere. So this chassis here is the 802.12, which is, I don't have it anymore. And what I'm looking for inside of this is state v2 not connected. So this is how I created this code here, right? I look into what this chassis does, and I'm looking at what it does. So the state is polling, so it keeps trying, and state v2 tells me it's not connected. So I'm based on that, I'm saying this chassis is not, I'm not using it in the chassis, so I should remove it. So this is what I'm doing here. So it goes in, so this file will go on and remove the chassis. So now when I look back, it's the same as me going in here on the ports and removing it by hand, right? So over here, so it got removed finally by the code here. So it's the same thing as me going in here and kind of deleting using this X. So I cancel that out. So now the next chassis that's there, it's the one that I'm using, so it should be connected. So when I'm looking at it, so this chassis now is going to be looking at the state 2 is ready and state 1 is ready. So this is chassis is not going to be part of this if statement, so it's just move on. So now you have a clean kind of session, right, where you loaded up you load up the file and you map your own ports to it. So that's pretty much it for this session. And at this point here, I'm just gonna release all the ports and get out of the session. So this here, do the release. It's gonna just release all the ports. So now the ports are gonna be released from the session. And that's it. So a good practice when you're trying to save a file and give it to somebody, it's to do this here. You release all the ports before you save the file, and then when somebody loads the file, that no ports are going to be there. So all you had to do now is actually just look at this and insert your new file, your new ports. So that's the better approach. That then you have no extra chassis hanging around or anything. Okay, so this is all I wanted to cover on this session. I hope if you have any questions, of course, you can always reach me.